So in the last video, we were talking about the AMDs and Intel processors, and I was going to talk to you about the ARM processors, but I'll hold on for 2 seconds and we'll carry on with the AMD and Intel. Because whilst I'm here, what I should mention is the difference between a, let's just call it desktop CPU versus a server CPUs. Right, what's the difference? Effectively, a server should be more powerful. You would assume, and there's many caveats in computer science. This is the problem. I can't just say a server is more powerful, because it's not necessarily the case. But when we think of servers, we think of these big, huge, with all the loads of flashing lights, and there's racks, and they're taller than I am. They're quite tall. You know that these are what we think of as server. We think of them as server rooms, as it were. Now, a server in itself, I don't want to get into too much, but it doesn't have to be fast. It doesn't have to be very quick. It can be on a little Raspberry Pi, which we haven't spoken about yet. But a Raspberry Pi, or just a Pi, is effectively something that's very, very small. It's got not very much processing power, but it can run an operating system. You can put Unix-based operating systems on there. They run perfectly well. You can hack from a Raspberry Pi very well. You know, they're brilliant devices. You can add things. You can build your own really cool things. I definitely advise everyone to have a look at one and play with one if you can. This can be a server. So I just wanted to quickly make sure that you're aware that a Raspberry Pi with very, very little processing power can be a server. But I want you to put that to one side for a second and think of servers, for now, think of servers more like this. So the big servers. Now when we get back to the CPU server, we had the E series, so the E series for Intel. And really, we had the Threadripper and EPYC series. These are just the names of them, right? That's all. They're very expensive. Modern day, the fastest Threadrippers, they're extremely fast. They'll set you back around 4,000-ish dollars, pounds, whatever you want to say. They're quite expensive. Same as these, they're quite expensive, and Intel's obviously, right? They're super fast things here. Intel have come in away from their server CPUs a little bit here. Their i9s are very, very fast. Now, the differences in prices, I'm just saying this here, right? Just so you get an idea of roughly how much these things are. They're thousands of pounds. They're not cheap things. They can be cheap. You can get the older versions and they're cheap, but you know they're quite expensive. Considering I can build an entire computer for £4,000, very, very powerful gaming machine for £4,000. Spending £4,000 on one CPU is, well, you're going to need a reason to want to do this. So a server in this sense, and a server CPU, it's not necessarily for servers. We don't necessarily have to have these in these huge server machines that we were talking about with racks and all sorts of things. We've seen them on the films, these server farms, the factories, and they look like huge tower blocks. They're huge things. They're not necessarily used in these. You can have this in a desktop, but the point here is that the CPUs, the server CPUs, namely these sort of things here, all of these, the server ones tend to be more powerful, and effectively that's all it is. So I'll stop the video here, and on the next video we'll talk about ARM processors.